I want you to try a little visualization experiment with me to kick things off.
Okay, I'm ready.
So imagine it's a Saturday afternoon. Maybe it's 1950, maybe it's today, and you're just scrolling through a classic movie channel.
You're right.
And you land on a Western. You know the exact scene immediately.
The saloon doors swing open.
Exactly. The saloon doors swing open.
Okay.
The music swells up. Lots of brass, lots of sweeping strings.
Right.
And in walks the hero. White hat, perfect teeth, the fringe on his jacket that somehow isn't dirty at all, even though he's been riding a horse for 3 days.
It's always spotless.
Always. He walks up to the bar. But I want you to look past him.
Look at the guy leaning against the wall in the back.
Right. Look at that guy. He's not the main villain. He's the guy standing directly behind the villain.
Yeah, the muscle.
Right. He looks tough, maybe a little weathered. He's got a scar or a crooked nose, or he's just got that look of someone who has actually worked for a living. And then 5 minutes later, a brawl inevitably breaks out. This guy throws one punch, misses wildly, gets hit in the jaw by the hero, falls backward over a breakaway table.
And you never see him again.
And you never see him again.
The disposable bad guy. Henchman number 3.
Precisely. Henchman number 3. If you have ever watched the old Cisco Kid shows or Heroes of the Alamo or literally hundreds of other Westerns from the Golden Age, you've seen this man's face.
Oh, absolutely.
You've probably seen him get fake shot off a roof or fall off a horse or get dragged through the dirt behind a wagon. But I guarantee you do not know his name.
And honestly, that is a massive oversight in film history.
Yeah.
Because while the stars got their names on the poster, people like him were the actual, the internal combustion engine of the industry.
The machinery.
Exactly. Without them, the hero is literally just a guy in a costume punching the empty air.
Well, today we are pulling that guy out of the background. We're putting him center stage. We are doing a deep dive into the life of Carl Mathews.
Yes, we are.
And let me tell you, looking at the sources we have compiled for this deep dive, we're talking biographical records, extensive filmographies, a bunch of census data. This is not your typical Hollywood story.
No, it's not the classic star gets discovered sipping a milkshake at Schwab's Pharmacy kind of thing.
Not even close.
This is a story about the absolute grind.
Yeah.
We are talking about a man who appeared in over 200 films, shorts, and TV shows over a 33-year career.
200. I mean, that number just completely blows my mind.
It's a factory number. It really is. And that's really our mission for this deep dive, right? To look past those marquee names and try to understand the machinery of old Hollywood.
Right.
And we're doing it through the lens of this one incredibly hardworking guy. A guy who spent decades falling off horses just to make the hero look good.
Well, dealing with a reality that was far grittier than anything written in those scripts. So let's peel back the curtain here. Who was Carl Mathews? Because just looking at his resume, looking at where he came from, he might have been the toughest guy on any set he walked onto.
Regardless of who was playing the sheriff that day.
Exactly.
He certainly had the background to back it up. But, even pinning down his origin is a little tricky. The sources give us a bit of a mystery right out of the gate regarding his age.
Yeah, I saw that in the notes. There's a pretty big discrepancy between the census data and his death certificate, right?
It's a significant one.
Yeah.
So if you track the census data, 1910, 1920, all the way up to 1940, the records are remarkably consistent.
Yeah.
They all point to him being born on February 19th, 1903. But if you pull his death certificate from 1959, it lists his birth year as 1899.
That's a 4-year gap. What's your read on that? Like, was he aging himself down for Hollywood? The whole, I'm not 40, I'm a spry 36. I can still jump off that balcony routine.
It's very possible. I mean, Hollywood has always been hyper age conscious, even for stuntmen.
Sure.
If a casting director thinks you're too old to safely fall off a roof, you just don't eat that week. But it could also go the other way. Maybe he aged himself up earlier in life.
To get a job.
Or to join the military. We see that a lot in official records from that era. Kids lying about their age to enlist.
Wow, yeah.
We can't say definitively which one is the truth, but it adds this really fascinating layer of ambiguity to his history right from the very start.
A guy who shifted his identity to fit the need of the moment.
Exactly.
What isn't ambiguous, though, is where he came from. Because this was definitely not a kid from the Hollywood Hills with a dad already in the studio system.
Far from it. He was born on the Cherokee Reservation in Oklahoma. Okay. His parents were Sam and Hattie Mathews. And a really crucial piece of data we pulled from the sources here is that he was listed on the Dawes rolls.
Let's unpack that for a second for the listener. The Dawes rolls, that sounds very official, but what does it actually mean for his life?
So the Dawes Rolls were the official federal records used to register members of the 5 civilized tribes around the turn of the century.
And those were
The Cherokee, Creek, Choctaw, Chickasaw, and Seminole tribes.
right.
Being on that roll meant the U.S. government officially recognized his lineage. According to the records, Carl was 1/8 Cherokee.
Okay, so he grows up in Muskogee, Oklahoma. The records also show his father was a butcher. That paints a pretty specific picture, doesn't it?
It does.
Very grounded, working class, dealing with physical, messy labor from day one.
Exactly. And this is where the contrast with modern actors is so sharp. You know, today, if you want to be an action star, maybe you go to drama school.
Right, you take stage combat classes.
Or you hire a personal trainer for 6 months to get completely shredded on chicken and broccoli.
Right.
Carl Mathews. He didn't need a boot camp. He lived a full, genuinely dangerous life before he ever even saw a movie camera.
I was looking at his pre-Hollywood timeline in our research, and it reads like an adventure novel.
Or a cautionary tale.
Right. First off, he was a veteran of World War I.
Which, let's be honest, involves a level of trauma and sheer toughness that's hard for us to even quantify today.
Totally. And then, in the 1920s, he served in the Merchant Marines.
Yeah.
Stop there for a second. Merchant Marines.
Yeah.
That's not just casually sailing around. What does that actually entail on a day-to-day basis?
Well, it means you're comfortable working at extreme heights, you're rigging sails, dealing with shifting decks in the middle of storms.
You have to have incredible physical balance.
Absolute balance. And you have to be able to take and execute orders instantly in a highly chaotic environment.
Which sounds a lot like a movie set.
Exactly. Think about how directly that translates to stunt work later on.
Rigging, balance, chaos. Yeah, that tracks perfectly.
And then by the end of the 1920s, he was back on dry land, working for the railroads as a switchman.
A switchman. Okay, just so we are totally clear, that's the guy physically running between the tracks, manually throwing the heavy iron levers to switch the rails while massive trains are barreling around him.
Yes. It was frankly one of the most dangerous jobs in America at the time.
I can imagine.
You make a mistake, you lose a finger, you trip, you lose a leg, or get crushed between train cars. It required constant hypervigilance and agility.
So we have a soldier, a sailor, and a railroad worker.
Yeah.
That is basically the trifecta of hard labor in the early 20th century.
It really is.
By the time he actually gets to Hollywood, he's probably 10 times tougher than the stunt coordinators telling him what to do.
And that background provides a certain texture to his performances.
What do you mean by texture?
Well, when you see him on screen, even if he's just standing in the background holding a horse, he has a physicality that you just can't teach in an acting class.
He knows how to inhabit his body.
Yes. He knows how to move. He knows how to work with his hands. He knows what it actually looks like to be bone-tired. He wasn't playing grit, he was grit.
So he's in Muskogee. He's working the railroad. And he's got a family by this point, right?
Yes, according to the records, he married a woman named Margaret sometime in the 1920s, and they had a son, Carl Jr., who was born in 1930.
So he's a dad, he's a husband, he's a railroad switchman. What makes a guy with all those roots just pack up his family and move out to Tinseltown?
Was it just the dream of fame?
Yeah? Did he want his name in lights suddenly?
Honestly, looking at the history, I don't think it was fame so much as sheer survival.
Oh, interesting.
Look at the dates. The census shows the family was in Muskogee in 1930, but by 1935, they had relocated and settled in Los Angeles.
Ah, the mid-30s.
Yeah,
Right in the brutal thick of the Great Depression.
exactly. And think about where they were coming from. Oklahoma, the Dust Bowl.
Right.
The economy there was being utterly decimated. People were moving west for work, any work they could find, and the film industry in LA was one of the very few places that was actually booming.
Specifically the production of B-Westerns, right?
Yes, the B-Western economy.
We hear that term a lot in film history, B-Western. But what does it actually mean for a guy like Carl entering the workforce? What was that economy like?
It was incredibly high volume, very low margin.
Yeah.
These were not artistic, sweeping masterpieces that took an entire year to film. These were consumer products, like churning out cans of soup.
Wow.
The studios were just pumping them out. Sometimes they'd shoot a whole feature film in 5 or 6 days.
6 days for an entire movie.
Sometimes less. And because they were moving at that breakneck speed, they just needed bodies.
They didn't have time for divas.
No time at all. They needed guys who could Ride horses, take a punch, hit the dirt, get back up, and do it again 10 minutes later from a different angle without complaining.
They needed absolute reliability.
And that is exactly where Carl Mathews found his lane. His very first credited role in the sources is from 1935. It was a movie called Rough Riding Ranger.
A B-Western.
A low-budget Western, which perfectly sets the tone for his entire career trajectory. He played a character named Cinch Clemens.
Cinch Clemens? I absolutely love that name. It sounds like a guy who's definitely going to try to rob a stagecoach and just fail immediately.
That is remarkably accurate for the kind of roles he got. This brings us to the specific archetype Mathews embodied on screen. The sources describe most of his roles as being one of the underlings of the antagonist.
The classic henchman?
The henchman, the guy who takes orders from the smooth-talking bad guy, he's the muscle.
Right.
And because he's the muscle, his job description in the script is inevitably to lose the fight.
It's kind of funny when you really think about it. Here is a World War I vet, a merchant marine, a guy who survived working the railroads.
Yeah.
And his professional life becomes getting beat up on camera by actors who, let's be real, probably had manicures earlier that morning.
That's the grand irony of Hollywood.
Yeah.
But we have to look at the sheer volume of his work to truly understand the grind he was on. We mentioned he was in over 200 productions. When you scroll through his filmography, you see titles that really capture the specific flavor of that era.
Oh, I have the list right here in our research. These are just incredible. The Sagebrush Family Trails West.
Classic.
Billy the Kid's Gun Justice. Custer's Last Stand.
And he wasn't just stuck in the serious, gritty ones. He did the spoof movies, too.
Yeah, I saw one title in the filmography that just stopped me in my tracks. Skip Along Rosenbloom.
Yes, Skip Along Rosenbloom.
Oh.
Released in 1951. It was a parody Western.
That title alone deserves some kind of Academy Award. But it really shows he was working constantly. It didn't matter if it was high drama or total lowbrow comedy. If there was a paycheck, he was on set.
And that intense work ethic continued right through the transition from film to television. The records show he appeared in dozens of episodes of The Cisco Kid.
Now that's interesting because television was the wild new frontier back then. It must have changed the workflow completely.
It made it even more of a grind, actually. It was essentially the gig economy long before we even had a phrase for it. The Cisco Kid was a huge hat. For a character actor like Mathews, a recurring gig on a show like that, even if he was playing a totally different henchman or background character week after week, was incredibly valuable, steady pay.
So he's basically the Uber driver of Hollywood henchmen, just picking up rides wherever and whenever he can.
In a way, yes, but with significantly higher physical stakes.
Right, let's really dig into those physical stakes. Because we say he acted in 200 films, but a lot of what he was doing was way more dangerous than just standing there and delivering a line of dialogue.
Absolutely. We have to talk about the stunt work. In the production sources, he's frequently listed as a stuntman or a body double.
Okay.
This is where that insane background, the balance from the ships, the spatial awareness from the railroad really pays dividends.
What kind of stunts are we actually talking about here?
We're talking about the absolute classics of the genre. Horse falls, wagon crashes, massive bar brawls. He performed stunts in films like Heroes of the Alamo in 1937 and Buffalo Bill Rides Again in 1947.
And he worked in the serials too, right? Like The Great Adventures of Wild Bill Hickok.
Yes. And think about the actual structure of a movie serial back then. It's usually 12 or 15 chapters, and every single one ends in a crazy cliffhanger.
So the hero is always in peril.
Exactly. That means 12 or 15 major action sequences per production. Chases, fistfights, explosions. They required consistent, repeated physical exertion.
And Mathews was right there in the thick of it, taking the hits.
Every time.
You mentioned body doubling earlier. That seems like a very specific skill set. It's not just being brave and willing to fall down. It's about mimicry, isn't it?
It is. The records show he doubled for stars like Fred Scott and Ray Corrigan, who is known as Crash Corrigan.
Crash Corrigan.
Now, Ray Corrigan was a big guy, a very physical actor, hence the nickname Crash. The fact that Mathews could seamlessly double for him tells us a lot about Mathews' own physique and presence.
He had to match his body language perfectly.
Down to the way he walked. If Ray Corrigan had a specific swagger or a specific way of swinging up into a saddle, Mathews had to replicate that exactly.
Right, because if he didn't, the audience would spot the fake immediately.
Exactly. You have to convince the camera from 50 feet away that you are the star. You essentially have to erase your own ego and become someone else's shadow.
It's a pretty thankless job, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, you do the dangerous jump, you risk the broken collarbone, and then the film cuts to a close-up of the beautiful star dusting off his hat, and the star gets all the applause in the theater.
It is entirely thankless, and it's incredibly physically punishing over time. We have to remember, safety standards in the 1930s and 40s were virtually non-existent compared to today.
Right. There was no CGI to fake it, no hidden wires removing the impact of a fall.
If the script said fall off the horse at a full gallop, you fell off the horse at a full gallop.
Ouch.
They used to use these things called running W wires to actually trip the horses during a chase.
Which is incredibly cruel and totally illegal now.
Very illegal now, but back then it meant the crash was violent, chaotic, and completely unpredictable for the rider.
So you're hitting the hard dirt repeatedly, take after take.
Exactly. And gravity is gravity. You do that for 30 years, your body is going to keep the score.
Yeah.
Every single fall is a micro-trauma.
And I think that brings us to the darker side of this story. Because you really can't live that kind of life. The chronic physical pain, the constant hustle for the next gig, the massive adrenaline spikes, without it taking a serious toll on your personal life.
Unfortunately, the historical records regarding his personal life reflect exactly that kind of instability.
We mentioned his first wife, Margaret, earlier. They moved to LA together around 1935, right at the start of his film career.
Right. They make the big move, the career starts to pick up some momentum, and the marriage collapses.
Really?
Yeah. Shortly after he entered the film industry, they divorced. The census sources show that Margaret actually returned to Oklahoma with their young son, Carl Jr., to live with her parents.
Oh, man, that's rough. So the Hollywood dream starts to become a reality, and his family falls apart almost immediately.
It definitely seems that way based on the timeline, and the pattern unfortunately repeated itself. By the 1940 census, records show he had remarried.
Okay.
His new wife was a woman named Irene. But further sources indicate that this marriage also eventually ended in divorce.
It's the classic Hollywood tragedy, isn't it?
Yeah.
We always hear about the massive A-list stars having, 7 husbands or wives, the whole Elizabeth Taylor lifestyle.
Right.
But even for the blue-collar guys working in the background, the pressure was exactly the same. Or, honestly, maybe even worse.
I'd argue it was much worse. They dealt with the same incredibly long hours, the same constant travel to locations, the same deep instability, but they didn't have the mansions or the personal assistants or the massive bank accounts to smooth things over.
Yeah, they were just scraping by.
And then you have to factor in the physical pain we talked about.
Right. If you're waking up incredibly sore every single day from being thrown through a breakaway window, and you have to get up at 4 a.m. to drive to some dusty ranch in the valley to do it all again, how do you actually cope with that?
In 1940s Hollywood, you drink?
Yeah.
There wasn't physical therapy for bit players. There wasn't advanced sports medicine or pain management as we know it today. There was just whiskey at the end of the day.
Which sadly leads us to the end of his story.
Yes. Carl Mathews died on May 3rd, 1959 in Los Angeles County.
And what do the records say?
The official cause of death listed on his certificate is cirrhosis of the liver.
Which usually points pretty directly to long-term alcohol abuse.
It does. It's a very tragic, very common ailment for men of that specific generation, and especially in that line of physical work. It strongly suggests a life of self-medication.
He was trying to get through the days.
Exactly. He was likely in constant pain, both physical and perhaps emotional from the broken marriages, and alcohol was the cheapest, most available remedy.
And if we circle back to that age discrepancy we talked about at the very beginning of the deep dive.
Right. If he was actually born in 1903, like the census consistently said, he was only 56 years old when he died.
Wow.
If the death certificate was right and he was born in 1899, he was 60.
56 or 60. I mean, either way, that is not a ripe old age. That is startlingly young to pass away.
It really highlights the ultimate cost of that tough guy lifestyle.
Yeah.
Think about his whole arc. He survived the brutal trenches of World War I.
Yeah.
He survived the treacherous storms in the Merchant Marines. He survived dodging trains on the railroads. But Hollywood,
Hollywood kind of chewed him up.
it really did.
It's very sobering. You look at a list of 200 credits on an actor's page, and you naturally think, wow, what an incredibly successful career.
And to be fair, it was successful. He worked more consistently than 99% of actors who come to LA ever do.
That's true. But the human cost behind that long list of credits is just immense.
I think that's a very fair assessment based on the sources. The studio industry needed men like him. They needed men who could take a heavy hit, men who could ride fast, men who genuinely looked the part of a hardened pioneer.
But the industry didn't necessarily take care of them in return.
No, it's an extractive industry at its core. Once those guys couldn't take the hard fall anymore, or once their bodies gave out, they were often just replaced, just gone.
But I think it's really important, as we wrap up here, that we don't just view Carl Mathews as a victim of the system. He was a true professional.
Absolutely. We shouldn't pity him at all. We should respect the incredible hustle. He worked consistently for 33 years in what is famously the most fickle industry on earth.
Right.
That takes an immense amount of talent, endurance, and profound reliability. Directors knew that if they hired Carl Mathews for a shoot, he would show up on time, he would hit his mark perfectly, and he would make the scene work.
That's such a great point. Reliability is its own kind of talent. Especially when the sun is going down, you're losing light, and you only have one shot to get the wagon crash right because the studio can't afford to rebuild the wagon.
Exactly. You need the guy who gets it right the first time.
Yeah.
And connecting his specific story to the bigger historical picture. When we talk about the golden age of Westerns, we spend a lot of time talking about the myth of the West.
Right. The rugged individualism, the frontier spirit, the whole taming of the wild land narrative.
The John Wayne fantasy, the idea that one stoic man with a gun can solve every complex problem.
Carl Mathews was, in a very strange way, the actual reality behind that shiny myth.
Yes.
He was the actual laborer. He was the actual war veteran. He was the actual guy with Cherokee heritage, working day in and day out in a movie genre that often simplified or completely mythologized all of those complex things.
He was the real deal, pretending to be a fake cowboy, while the fake cowboys got all the glory.
That is perfectly said. And without him, and without the hundreds of other working-class stuntmen and bit players just like him, that Hollywood myth would have just been actors in clean costumes standing around talking on a soundstage.
He gave it the necessary grit. He gave it the illusion of real danger. When you watch an old film and a fight scene feels surprisingly visceral, it's not because of the star throwing the fake punch. It's because of the guy taking the hit and selling it to the camera.
So, after digging through all these records and filmographies, what does this all mean for us, the viewers, sitting at home today?
I think it fundamentally changes how you watch these films. Or at least it really should.
How so?
Well, the next time you watch The Cisco Kid or Buffalo Bill Rides, again, don't just focus on the guy with the most lines. Look at the edges of the frame.
Right.
Look at the guy quietly holding the horses in the background. Look at the guy taking the punch and falling over the table. That's where the real physical work of cinema is happening. That's Carl Mathews.
It's like seeing the hidden strings on a puppet. But instead of ruining the magic of the show, it actually makes you appreciate the skill of the puppeteer even more.
Exactly. It deepens your appreciation for the sheer collective craft of filmmaking. It's a massive group effort built on the bruised backs of people whose names usually don't ever make it onto the movie poster.
Carl Mathews, born on a reservation, worked the dangerous railroads, and died in Hollywood. 150-plus films where his only job was to play the underling who loses.
Yeah.
But today, for a few minutes at least, he gets to be the star of the show.
And deservedly so. He really represents a massive, largely invisible workforce that quite literally built the cinema history we cherish today.
You know, it really makes you wonder, the next time you're scrolling through a streaming app or watching an old black and white movie on cable, just pause it during a big crowded scene like a bar fight.
Just freeze the frame.
Yeah, freeze the frame and really look at the faces in the background. We focus so much of our cultural energy on the stars, the off-screen drama, the big awards. But here's a thought I want you to take with you. How many other Carl Mathews are frozen in those frames? How many of those nameless extras stormed a beach in Normandy or built a skyscraper with their bare hands or lived a life that was 10 times more dramatic than the script they were filming that day?
We see them for a split second, but they carried a whole rich world with them.
A whole world in a single frame. Well, thanks for listening to this deep dive into the life of the Invisible Cowboy. We'll catch you on the next one.